Hey y'all, welcome to our podcast, Don't Get Me Started with DRMS. We are so excited to have you all along for our very first episode, our inauguration episode, if you will, into the world of podcasting. This is a place where we can really dig into some of the topics and areas of advocacy and law that's at the heart of what we do here at DRMS. It's also a place where we can shine a light on the obstacles and concerns that our Mississippians with disabilities are faced with daily. My name is Greta Martin, and I'm the Litigation Director here at Disability Rights Mississippi. And today, as our very first guest, we have our fearless leader, the lady in charge, and a person who is probably already regretting putting a mic in front of me, our Executive Director, Polly Tribble. Thank you.
Whoa, we need sound effects like, you know?
Well, we'll have to work on that.
Yeah.
All right, Miss Polly, Can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your history here at Disability Rights Mississippi?
Okay. So I have a master's degree in clinical psychology from the great Mississippi State University. And yeah, Greta does not share my enthusiasm of the wonderful Bulldog country. Anyway, so once I left graduate school, I went to work as an associate psychologist at Mississippi State Hospital at Whitfield. I was there for a couple of years and then came here to what was then Mississippi Protection Advocacy System. At that time, I did mostly go into facilities that serve people with developmental disabilities. And so over the years, I've done various and sundry different things around here and became the director about 3.5 years ago. So.
Awesome.
Dun, dun, dun.
So you are an old guard here, so you've been here a while.
Awesome. Old as in O-L-E
right,
with an apostrophe.
Exactly.
Right, yes. I have been around for a while,
That's
indeed.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to jump right in.
Okay.
Let's pretend for a second that DRMS is not on my pay stub. I do not work here.
Okay.
Give me your elevator speech on who Disability Rights Mississippi is and what we do here.
Okay. We are a legally based advocacy organization that protects the rights of people with disabilities. So our mission here is to make the lives of people with disabilities better. We want them to make their own choices. We want them to be included in the community and, most importantly, be treated with respect and dignity, just like anybody else.
Awesome. And you mentioned protection and advocacy agency. So can you tell me just a little bit about what a protection and advocacy, which we call it the P&A.
That's right.
Tell me a little bit more about that and the network we're involved in.
Okay, so a long time ago, like in the late 1970s, there was a media attention to a horrible facility in New York State that served people with developmental disabilities. And that video stirred a lot of emotions in people and saw that we weren't treating people as best as we could. We weren't even treating them humanely up there. So it got the attention of the U.S. Congress, who then, at about the same time, came up with the Developmental Disabilities Bill of Rights. And in that law, there was a provision to protect the rights of people with developmental disabilities. So that, the P&As were born. And so there was appropriations and authority given to entities to protect the rights. So every state in the nation has a protection and advocacy system. Also, every U.S. territory and the District of Columbia has a P&A. There's also one focused on Native Americans. So every state, we all make up what we call National Disability Rights Network, or NDRN. And so we all work as a unit, but we all operate separately.
All right, and, Disability Rights Mississippi, as the P&A for the state of Mississippi, has some pretty unique access authority that was outlined by Congress in several statutes.
Right.
So can you talk just a little bit, I know it's a lot of acronyms, I like to call it alphabet soup, but can you talk just a little bit about those funding grants that provide us our access authority?
Right. So just a minute ago I told you about the DD, or developmental disabilities provisions, and so since that time in 1980 or 1978, since that time, there's been other laws that have outlined provisions for people with disabilities, and along with that comes appropriations to the P&A. So the P&As, in our case, the Protection Advocacy, we were designated by the governor to get these funds. So anytime a law is passed that has money associated with it to protect the rights of the disabilities, that's funneled to our agency. So along with those laws that came provisions to protect the rights, we also, thankfully, our national organization and Congress decided that in order to do our jobs, we needed access to things that weren't available necessarily to the public. So these provisions that we've been talking about in the laws also allow for us to have access authority beyond what any other person might have. So if a facility protects the rights or has people that have any type of disability, then we have access to that facility so that we can find out what their treatment is and how well things are going for them. Our primary focus here has been and will always be protecting somebody with a disability. So we always zero in on suspected abuse or neglect, and it will always remain one of our top priorities. I mean, that's the way Congress designed it, and that's the way this agency and the board wants to move forward. So we do have unique access authority. We are the envy of a lot of people because of the way that we can have access. Now, of course, I'm jumping around a little bit, but we also maintain individual cases. And so, of course, the sanctity of that relationship with an individual and a lawyer is protected. And we also recognize that people have rights in facilities, and so we don't want to break confidentiality or their privacy rights. But in general, we have access to records and programmatic things that happen in facilities. And if we suspect abuse and neglect of a person who, let's say, might be nonverbal, then we have the authority to go and check their records and things like that without even getting permission from a guardian or from that person if we suspect abuse or neglect.
Okay. And let's talk just a little bit about those specific. I know our access authority comes from some different provisions under PAMI, PAD, PAIR. Can you talk to me just a little bit about those separate? I know we get our funding through that as well as our authority, and just what each of those stand for.
Okay.
Very briefly.
Okay. I'm not sure that anybody cares. However, the Protection Advocacy for People with Developmental Disabilities, that acronym is PADD. We call it PAD. And so that was through the Developmental Disabilities Bill of Rights that I was telling you about earlier. This kind of like the cornerstone of what we do. And then we have the Protection Advocacy for Individuals with Mental Illness. And we call that PAMI, which is PAIMI. That's the acronym for that. And that originally was for people in mental health facilities, only in mental health facilities. Now that has expanded to include people in the community. As we know, people want to be served close to home. So hopefully Mississippi will move towards serving people in the community rather than locking them up. Mm-hmm. So the PAD and the PAMI Act not only appropriates money, but also gives us authority to go into these facilities and investigate things. And PAIR is our other. These are probably our main three that we talk about. But Protection Advocacy of Individual Rights was set up because these other two programs kind of might not serve everybody with a disability. So this one doesn't have the age requirements that the PAD program has, because by the definition of what developmental disabilities is, that disability has to have manifested itself before the age of 21. And so, for instance, under PAIR, Protection Advocacy for Individual Rights, a person might acquire a disability after the age of 21. And so we can help them through that program.
Right. And like you said, those are our main three, or kind of our top three, but we have several others that covers things like employment issues, voting rights, and things like that, that we also are able to assist with.
Right.
So I want to move into just real quick what DRMS can assist an individual with. So just off the top of your head, what are 2 or 3 of our most common issues that we see time and time again here?
So we get our clients, and we stay on the pulse of what's going on in communities by calls, and we do outreach too, although that's been limited with coronavirus. So right now, I'd say the majority of our cases and our projects, which we can talk about, are from people calling us. So if people don't call us, we don't know, and we can't help you. A lot of times we see things with employment. If somebody with a disability has a job and they need some type of accommodation, that's something we can help with. We get a lot of calls from parents whose children are in special education in their school district, and we get a lot of calls with that. We absolutely cannot help. I mean, we don't have enough manpower to help every parent that calls as far as being one-on-one with them. But anybody that calls our office is going to get information, whether it's a referral to another agency or information on how to advocate for themselves. So those parents are armed with things that can help them. We have a case selection criteria on what educational type services that we take, because again, we just don't have enough people here to serve everybody who wants help. But we have great other agencies that do that, so we can refer people out.
I would definitely say under our civil rights team, which is one of the teams that falls under my work here as a litigation director, we see everything from housing discrimination to issues with reasonable accommodation in institutes of higher learning. We've seen everything from issues with accessibility to public buildings, issues of accessibility to athletic stadiums. We get a myriad of issues that we can either undertake as an individual representation, or we can put, as you mentioned earlier, in what we call a project, which basically means we've seen a trend and that we want to handle it on a more systemic level rather than an individualized level. And I think another big issue that we may tend to forget, because election days only come around every so often, but we do significant work on voting rights with regards to individuals with disabilities, both access to the polls and access to registration. So that's something that I know until an election is upcoming, we tend to forget that, but we do that work year round. And obviously we get that role under the Help America Act vote through PAVA. Which is Protection and Advocacy for Voting
Access.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lots of acronyms.
It's a
I
test.
call it alphabet soup all the time. So in hoping that our listening audience is going to be more than just our communications director and our husbands,
which they might not even listen either.
They're going to be forced to listen to it too. Let's tell people, if they need DRMS's help, how they can get in touch with us and what that process looks like.
Okay. And can I say one more thing?
Sure.
We also want to ramp up our help to people as far as Medicaid issues. And so we have an attorney that does that. And so, we encourage people, but as far as Medicaid appeals, we can't necessarily help people in their application for that. But as far as any appeals or questions they might have. So our number is 601-968-0600. Or you can call the 800 number, which is 1-800-772-4057. And what's going to happen is you'll talk to Nicole, our receptionist. She'll get some basic information from you and set up a time for our intake specialist to call you back. So at that time, you'll have a dedicated 30 minutes to an hour so that we can get some information so that we can share it with the attorneys here to figure out if there's something we can help you with, or would you be better served by us referring you out or giving you information.
Great. And so I definitely want to also encourage people that even if they aren't sure their issue is something we can deal with, that they do reach out and go through our intake process. And if it in fact is something that falls outside of our criteria, that we do, as you've mentioned, have a wide range of resources and referrals that we can not only give people, but maybe even in some instances help them connect with those referrals. So well, thank you, Polly, for being here. Coming the 6 feet from your office to our closet turned podcast studio. We are happy that you came and told us a little bit more about Disability Rights Mississippi. Well, I think that does it for this inaugural episode of Don't Get Me Started with DRMS.
Don't get me started.
Don't get me started. But don't forget to subscribe. You'll be the first to know when an episode drops, and make sure while you're there you review today's episode. And over the next few episodes, we intend to cover our prison work, which we have been doing over the past year and a half, and recently released a report of our findings and data. So we are going to be covering that in the next few episodes and have some discussion on that data and what we have found. So make sure you follow us on Twitter and Facebook so you can stay up to date on what we're doing here at DRMS. And until next time, this is Greta Martin and DRMS.
Hey, this is Jane Walton. I'm the Communications Director for Disability Rights Mississippi. I will be behind the scenes on this podcast, doing the editing, doing lots of thumbs up and nodding behind Greta and our guest as they're recording. But I did want to pop in to let our host introduce herself. You'll be hearing a lot from Greta as she gets started on Don't Get Me Started. So we wanted to give her the opportunity to get to know y'all a little bit more. So Greta, tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your role here at Disability Rights, and what inspired you to start this podcast?
Okay, I am the litigation director here at Disability Rights Mississippi. So really what that encompasses is any legal avenue that disability rights pursues, whether it be on an individualized case level or a systemic level. I kind of oversee that litigation and manage both the litigation and any attorneys that participate in that. Also, my role, I supervise two teams. One is our civil rights team, and that team handles kind of your general civil rights violations that are associated with people with disabilities. So housing discrimination, employment discrimination, reasonable accommodation denial, things like that. But I also oversee our monitoring and investigations team, which includes the monitoring of mental health facilities across the state, correctional facilities, any facility that assists, houses, or provide services to individuals with disabilities falls under our purview, and we monitor those on a regular basis. And then any potential abuse and neglect that comes out of that monitoring, we have the authority to pursue an investigation. So I oversee the work of those two teams along with any litigation that the agency may want to get involved in. And I also assist the executive director and yourself with a lot of public policy work. I just monitor the Mississippi legislature and any issue that might affect the population that we serve. Any legislation that I think we should maybe go and educate our legislators on, or assist our legislators in drafting different legislation. So in that work, along with my litigation work, I just felt like DRMS needed a voice. We needed to get more information out to Mississippians about what we do, the projects that we're working on, results that we're seeing, systemic trends that we're seeing happening, and if they affected Mississippians, they'd know that we could help them. I just felt like DRMS has a lot to say, and we needed to get it out there.
Exactly. Hence, don't get me started. Just tell everyone a little bit more about what that title means and kind of where that came from.
Apparently, I say that a lot.
It's true. Note for the audio. It's true.
I get that phrase works its way into my daily conversation a lot. I'm very passionate about the state of Mississippi, but unfortunately, like many Mississippians, I'm consistently disappointed. I'm disappointed in in how we progress. I'm disappointed in the areas where I know we can improve, and it seems our leadership ignores the issues. It's just a very heartbreaking thing to be a born and raised Mississippian and to see where our state is and where it could be. So, like I said, I start a lot of sentences with "don't get me started," because I feel like I do have a lot to say about different issues, and I can go on for a very long time, as evidenced in some of these episodes.
Yeah, well, your passion and honesty, I think, is going to serve this podcast really well, like you said, to give voice to some of these issues that I think more people need to know about. So I think it's really exciting. So as a born and raised Mississippian, let's ask a couple of fun questions. Okay. So not during COVID time, when you can get out and about, what are some of your favorite things to do, see, eat around Mississippi?
Ooh. So I'm originally from Northeast Mississippi, Tishomingo County. So some of my favorite times have been spent up at the Tishomingo State Park and in that area. I think it is an often forgotten area of the state. It's beautiful. It's filled with people who are just, the community up there is amazing. So I love traveling up there with my family. My husband's originally from Jackson, and his 3 children are all, Jacksonians. So to take them up to that area that's a little more rural, a little more Mayberry, he likes to call it that, a little more down home and nature and hiking. And I love doing that. It's just a wonderful area of the state. But I have truly, truly enjoyed living in Jackson. It's just, you get that Mississippi community, Mississippi hospitality in a city metropolitan type setting. So we are big supporters of local Jackson eateries. Non-COVID life, you could probably find me at Bravo anytime.
Bravo, if you would like to sponsor, don't get me started. We are open to discussions.
We should probably send this link to Jeff Good. But Bravo is one of our favorites. But any local Jackson eatery, we love supporting small business. And I love being from Mississippi, and I like discovering places that I didn't know existed in the state.
Awesome. Well, thank you for chatting with me just for a moment to let people get to know you. And you will hear lots more from Greta, so make sure you subscribe to stay up to date with Don't Get Me Started.
Information provided during this episode does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. All content provided by Disability Rights Mississippi on this podcast is for informational purposes only.